We give you some notes here. Again, I'm not up here to read the outline to you on running background checks. Background checks have become standard today. Certainly you want to check references. We've had questions about running credit checks on people. Credit checks generally have to be somewhat related to the job. In other words, if a person is being hired into the accounting function, you can certainly run a credit check on someone who's in any type of financial situation. It's clearly job related. Now, what you may not realize is if you run routine background checks, those are now considered similar to credit checks, and they're covered by the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And the top of the next page, we give you some information on that, and it basically requires you to tell people that you're going to run a background check. When people sign the application form, they give you permission to investigate them to a certain extent. And we do recommend that, and for senior positions, certainly I would expect that you would run routine background checks on people that are coming in and what we call lateral hires. If you're hiring very senior people, I would expect you would make some reasonable investigation of those people. Yes, ma'am.
One of our clients requires background checks as part of their master agreement. How do you do that retroactively if you already have employees who've been here for a while?
Get them to sign okay, question is you have a client, and you recall from our first session this morning that what the client wants is an awfully good reason, as long as it's not discriminatory, it's an awfully good reason to require things, and it's well supported in Texas law. But if you run a background check on your people afterwards, then if there's any question about whether they consented, just print up a consent form, have everybody sign off on it. Person doesn't sign off on it, it's okay, but they're not going to be able to work on that position. And you can just say that, well, and obviously it could have employment implications if that's where you need that person to be working, and they say, well, no, I won't let you run a background check. Then that could be a self-termination situation, or what we call self-selection, where the person doesn't have an alternative, you don't have an alternative position for them. But usually you don't put your whole team on one project, so usually someone says, well, I'm really uncomfortable doing this, then you may have another project to put them on. I guess the concern I would have is if there's something unusual going on that would interfere with that. And be prepared, because background checks, we're doing some, my consulting firm is subcontractor to people doing some business for the federal government, and the federal government has gone way over on this homeland security, anti-terrorism stuff and all that into security checks and stuff like that. And so do not be surprised if you're working on a particular facility where it's more than just a routine background check. It's like a security check. I predict you're going to see a lot more of that in the next. I mean, we're already seeing it. I do a lot of work in the greater D.C. area, and of course, federal government has a huge impact there. Well, that'll trickle out into the burbs, and so anticipate that there'll be more requests to do that, because it may not be that you're working directly for the federal government, but you're on a project, and the government required the general to certify, and then the general will come down and require you to certify the people that are on that project have been checked out. And some of the things could be kind of like the Mission Impossible stuff, or whatever TV shows or movies or whatever, where you're working on a design that would include how to get in and out of a secure building. So they want to make sure the people that are helping design it are not using the information or passing it along to other folks. So again, as you sit here, you may say, well, how would this catch up with us? Well, that's what I'm saying, is it might catch up with you more quickly than you realize. And it's certainly fair game. I mean, if you think that the other side's being unreasonable, it's certainly fair game not to bid on the project, or you feel that they're a little out of sorts. And I can't imagine what it was like when EDS was controlled by Ross Perot. I can't imagine what that must have been like, because I could imagine they were doing some stuff like that to some of their vendors and things. So if you think it's reasonable, then there's probably other business that you can bid on. But you do need to give people notice if you're running background checks, and it's best to get a written consent form. And the bottom line on this, by the way, is why is this a concern? It's a concern for all of us in this days of identity theft, is that if you flunk a background check, and most of us in this room do not anticipate that we would, then we want to know what the heck happened. And the law gives you the right to get the information on what agency was used, so you can go to that agency and say, whoa, what are you looking at? And it may be a mistaken identity. It could be that there's been an undisclosed identity theft, and you find out that there's a criminal record that's been constructed on you that it's not you, but somebody somehow put that on your record. I don't do debt collection anymore, but one of the things my firm did at one time is we occasionally did debt collection for clients, and we ran some investigative reports in that time period and found that there would be 4 or 5 people using the same Social Security number. Stuff like that. I mean, it's real interesting stuff. Yes, sir.
Is there any reason why you can't check a reference that isn't given to you by an employee? I'm going from the premise that nobody's going to give you a bad reference.
Okay.
Although some do. But if you know somebody who might know about this person, is there anything wrong with contacting somebody whose name they didn't give you?
If they signed the application form, they're giving you permission to check them out, and that doesn't mean just the stuff that they give you. So that would be my caveat. If you just have the resume, I'd be a little bit more careful. And I presume this situation where they list their last 3 employers, and you know that 10 years ago they worked for someplace else. So you'd call the more distant employer because you know for a fact that they work there. Would that be a correct example?
For example, if somebody that was an architect listed a client to call as a reference, I may want to call the contractor that worked on that job who would know how this person performed, assuming that the client's going to give me a good reference. Why would they put it down there?
Right. So
I might call a contractor to say, how did this person perform on this job?
well, I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I would encourage that, and that's what we're saying here today, that we're encouraging you to really check out people that you're hiring. And so what you've suggested is you say the person lists the client, but you happen to know who the general contractor was, the GC on that job. Would you be able to contact the GC? And the answer is absolutely, and in fact it would be highly recommended. So once you have consent, you have open consent, and you can certainly check things out. And if you were running a thorough background check, I mean, there's multiple levels of background check. I can tell you, if you went to work for the CIA or FBI, they actually physically send people out and talk to your neighbors. And I know that for a fact. So I mean, it's really interesting. So what you're talking about doing is far more mundane, is what I'm suggesting. Yes, ma'am.